Well, hello and welcome back to Read Becca. It is time for my weekly chatty catch-up on everything that I've read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading, as well as some general chit-chat and lifey stuff. This week was a good reading week. I finished a couple of things, so let's start first, I think, with the book that I don't have on hand and I don't have too much to say about. So first, I read Artemis Fowl, number 3, The Eternity Code. And this is by Owen Colfer. So Artemis Fowl is kind of a boy genius. This is on the upper end of middle grade and lower end of YA, I would say. But it's a great action-packed series for sure. And Artemis Fowl is very smart. He outsmarts everyone. And his ideals, because of his parentage basically, are somewhat questionable. He is very driven to greed, which means he's extremely, extremely wealthy. He and his family are. And over the course of this series, we very much have seen him, he still has a heart of gold, despite the fact that he's kind of a boy genius villain, and I like that. Here, I can't talk too much about the plot because it is the third book, and much of what has happened would be a spoiler for previous books. So I think the things I can talk about is that he has a too good to be true bodyguard, basically, called Butler, who is just the perfect bodyguard. Unbeatable, basically. And in most previous scenarios, Artemis gets himself into a tight spot and Butler sweeps in and saves him, time and again. But here we have Butler getting into a tight spot and Artemis, with the help of the fairies, because this is an urban fantasy, contemporary fantasy, that has a strong fairy, goblin, dwarf presence, an underworld, if you would, but they're high-tech types of fairies. So it's a very unique and kind of different take. So Artemis, with the help of the fairies that he knows over the course of this series, kind of have to step in and help Butler out of his tight spot. And I like that switch in dynamics. As well, going back to what I was saying earlier, in his values, probably the one thing that did stand out in this book for me is that Artemis is kind of forced to confront his values and that he does have kind of a good heart, and who he wants to be in the future. So I will kind of leave it there, but as usually happens with these sort of youth series, over the course of them, you get middling entries that follow the same formula kind of, and are enjoyable to read, but aren't really standouts, and that's very much what this is. So I think that one element of him facing his values was great and is important to the series overall probably, but it was not really a standout entry in either this series or as a book. I do think one thing that kind of surprised me, the title, The Eternity Code, and I don't think this really spoils anything, but I expected that to be something he was going after. That's kind of the dynamic we've had. But instead, it's kind of an enigma code that he has because he is a genius, and other people are wanting to get a hold of it. So that was part of why this wasn't a very strong entry for me personally, because it just kind of felt like he was trying to get through and survive threats to him, rather than having a real goal or drive towards something for the most part. So yeah, it was a kind of a shift in having incentive and motive, I think, in this story, but it was still very entertaining and fun, especially having done the audiobook. I really enjoyed it. So the next book that I picked up is kind of an unusual one, and that's A Key to Treehouse Living by Elliot Reed. And I think this is the author's only book. It's fairly short. I've never heard anyone talk about it, and it was just kind of one of those things where, like, the spine stood out to me on the shelf at the library, and I'm glad I picked it up because it is so unusual. So this is an experimental novel, I would say, but minimally so. However, the key to Treehouse Living is quite literal. It's a key in that it's told alphabetically as a glossary, pretty much. So you have alphabetical entries like wishing upon stars, wonder, wounds, the healing and reopening of. So it's just these very, very short entries on a topic, but it is also telling a story. And I enjoyed it so much. It kind of reminded me of Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury, in that we're getting the story over time of this boy as he is going through kind of coming of age, and we're experiencing in these kind of bite-sized pieces just simply the experience of childhood in his life. And it feels very fragmentary because of how it's told, but there is a progression. We're seeing things like his father leaving and him dealing with that in the way that a child does, where it's the only thing they've known. So they don't really have the context to feel it, to feel the depth of how heavy that is. It's just the only thing they've experienced. Going to live with an uncle who he loves very much, and then things going wrong with his uncle and him becoming a ward of the state. So there is a real progression, but I just enjoyed it very much because of how it's told. It has a kind of potato chip quality to it as well. Where I was sitting there reading, and because there are these short entries and there are no chapters, I kept finding myself sitting there going, well, I just want to read another one, just one more, and finding myself, 60 pages later still reading. So I don't know how to tell you really what the book is about other than that, because it is just simply a very day-to-day story of this life and coming of age of this boy. There's no grand arc to it, really. And it was really beautiful and very interesting and different from anything I've ever really read. So I'm so glad I picked it up. I don't know how to sell it to you as someone who talks about books, because it is just such a beautiful portrayal of this boyhood life. Let me find one of the entries that I marked that gives you a sense for that. It also has a great duality in wordplay throughout these entries, and I think that was one of the strongest parts of this. Down, braking. Someone's driving his car someplace, and the engine stops working, and he has to pull over and call a tow truck. That's a breakdown. During the draft, Ned, that's his friend, got picked to be on a team called the Crushers because their coach had picked him randomly, and it turned out that the Crushers were a team for which a gang of 5 bullies played. Bullies who knew Ned and had beaten him up on numerous occasions. So when Ned heard that he'd been drafted to that team, he had a breakdown. Mostly, the breakdown looked like crying and yelling, though it also looked like him taking his dad's shovel out to the backyard and digging himself a grave beneath an apple tree. So it's very, very funny and insightful, and it has that wordplay, and it just was a delight to read. And then we have a very odd one. Zoey Punches the Future in the Dick by David Wong, aka Jason Pargin. And I think probably most people have heard of Starter Villain by John Scalzi at this point, and this predates that, but has a very similar starting premise, the series does. The first book is Futuristic Violence and Fancy Suits, or maybe the other way around. So we start the series off by Zoey Ash being down and out young woman who lives in a trailer in Utah or Colorado or something, and with her cat Stench Machine, who I love. But she really isn't getting by. She's struggling. And then one day, people start trying to kill her and live streaming it. And so she gets on the run, and what do you know? We find out her estranged father, who she's had no relationship with, was in fact a crime boss. And he ran this city that's more or less a version of like Las Vegas in the middle of nowhere with no laws, that was just lawless, criminal. Everything is live streamed there. Everything is, everything goes there basically. The name of the city is Tabula Rasa, but the S is a $. And so it was very futuristic kind of Wild West sort of deal with high tech. And I love that setup because this is kind of near future. So it feels tangible, but it feels also slightly removed. And most interestingly, the live streaming aspect and the everybody feeling input and wanting to be part of the crazy things that are going on. He started writing this before that was really commonplace. This was early 2010s, and he's watched that grow over the course of the series, and he talks about that in the afterword to this one. So that's such a big element throughout this series that continues with this book. But so in book 1, these people are coming trying to kill her on the expectation that she's inheriting her father's crime dynasty, basically. And so moving into this book, now we continue having a lot of threat after her. So let me read the opening to this book, and great end papers, Stench Machine as always. The opening grips you immediately. Zoey Ash surveyed the carnage and said, "Sorry we're late. It was my cat's birthday." But they explain the situation that we're in at the start on the next page. The building the pissed off guy with superhuman strength had smashed his way into was a night-in cuddle theater. For $250, an attractive member of your preferred gender would curl up with you in pajamas and watch a movie in a small private room with a wet bar, snacks, and a fireplace. There was no sex. That theater was down the block, and they actually charged a lot less. So it's very snarky, very humorous, very over the top. Consistently, that's the whole way through. So if you don't like that tone, it won't work for you. So to what that was saying, we have a hostage situation at this place with someone who has sort of superhuman strength. And in this near future, people can kind of augment their body. So that's where the superhuman element comes in. They're not magically superhuman, it's technology. So we almost have a very strong like superhero world vibe to this series, but no one's really very heroic. And Zoey is consistently facing up against people, baddies who want to get her, but have this superhuman strength because they've augmented themselves in different ways. And that is a really curious dynamic because everyone has some different power, much like superhero series. And so we have a hostage situation. Zoey involves herself in this and tidies it up. But because of the situation that was going on, she makes some enemies. And that was the most interesting part of this and made it a fantastic book. The delivery was very good, but also the timing was really horrible. So I kept thinking I was going to put this down, even though I was loving it. The topic was just too close right now. Effectively, this is sort of an incel situation, a violent incel. And Zoey makes an enemy of the armies of internet incels in the manosphere. And so there is tons of amazing commentary on that throughout, on both empathetic to how men end up in that position and also very snarky and dismissive. So it kind of plays both sides. And I really liked that. I think this was handling that in a really smart way while maintaining this very fun, very high action plot. So it had a lot to say. And as I said, unfortunately, like right now, it was very hard to get through and read through that just because of the things that are going on in the real world on that topic right now, that it was very painful internally to read. But I thought this was a fantastic book, and Zoey is such a great character. As always, like I said, I love Stench Machine, the cat. I will say there was a significant amount of a prolonged duration threat to the cat, and I just hate that. I hate when the pet is used as a plot to pull the reader along. I always want the animal to be fine and great and under no threat whatsoever. I'm happy to tell you if you want to know whether the cat is fine or not. But this also is taking place at Halloween, so that was a very fun element. We're tying in, this crazy city at like major, it's almost Mardi Gras level, I think, of celebrations over Halloween. It's wild, over the top. The whole city is just going crazy for it. So it had all of that. It had the technology, it had the snark. Zoey's a great character, and it had so much to say. So I continue to love David Wong as a writer, and I'm very excited to get to his new book that was up on the Goodreads list for sci-fi, the big Black Box of Doom book. But I want to finish this series out before I do that. So this has one more book that I definitely want to get to. Onward from that to what I've been watching. I've not really felt like watching anything that required my brain. So as continues from last week, I have only been watching The Great British Menu, really. Season 11, I have finished it out at this point, and I really continue to enjoy it. I think I only have one more season after this available to me. And it's such a great, lovely competition show. Everyone has to come together in the end after they've been competing with each other to deliver a banquet. The four sort of winners have to deliver a banquet at the end, and so they all have to work very closely together for that. And it's just always very nice. The one thing I don't like is that over the course of the seasons, they have slowly added mechanics into the competition, or changed the mechanics of the competition to where it loses some of those friendly aspects, and it loses some of what I really liked about it originally. Things like it being judged blind doesn't happen anymore. And I really I like the level footing that blind judging places things on. And even, as it was, like, there are multiple rounds where they're cooking the same things. So only the first part was being judged blind, really. But I felt like that was so much better than going in. Now they go in knowing who cooked what is all on a menu together, and also what it was rated by the original judge. So there's an original judge who's a past competitor, and then it goes to the actual judges. And so they go in with all this information to bias them. And I just don't like any forms of bias being involved in competition, really. I like doing everything we can to mitigate those. So I don't like the way that changes have been made to the mechanics of the competition. But I still very much enjoyed it. It was fantastic. And this one was people who had previously been awarded by the Queen. And they were having it at Westminster. Was very cool, both to see and for the competitors. Like, that's a best moment of your life, or like crowning achievement of your cooking career. So yeah, it was lovely. And I of course did also finish Great British Bake Off. I will not spoiler anything, but again, I'm very happy with the way it ended, who won. It was lovely to see kind of the check-in with the competitors over the season at the end, and like the final bakes were just truly spectacular. But that's par for the course, I think. So I enjoyed it. I think that's all for watching. So onward to my week. I think we have to start with the unfortunate news that Dusty is gone. And as hard as that is, I am so glad to have had him here, to have been part of his journey, and to have been, a safe and comfortable place for him to spend that time. He was fostering with me since April, other than a short time when he was adopted and then came back, and it was such a joy to have him. And that, as I said before, is really why it's so important to foster, because this would have been so much more stressful for him to go through, as his health has been failing, if he were in a shelter environment. That is so hard on them. So yeah, Dusty was a very wonderful cat, and I'm so glad I got to meet him. In more positive cat news, because of all that was going on with Dusty, myself, I guess from both my own end and the vet's end, we kept having to reschedule and delay Ripley and Rue's yearly checkup. So they also got into the vet at the end of this week, and fantastic news. Their weights are both looking really good. Ripley is down significantly. They've both always been a little bit overweight. Ripley probably 1.5 pounds more than we would like her, and she's down 1 pound now, so she's most of the way through. And I've been monitoring that very, very carefully. You really do not want to take cats down significant amounts of weight rapidly at all. So we've had struggles with getting her to lose weight before, and that finally is progressing to where we want it to. So great news there. I've been having struggles with Rue, with him taking his medication. He's on anti-anxiety medication, and we got something from the vet that is not even prescription. It's additional, like a food topper type thing, to try. And so far, several days, it has been working. We will see if that continues on, but that would be an amazing help if it keeps up. So good news there. Otherwise, my week, I'm very low energy today already, just barely past noon, and I'm very tired, because I have thrown myself into organization and what I was saying, like kind of decluttering. I'm really feeling that. I keep getting distracted from minor day-to-day things I'm doing to just go declutter something. I will just open a cabinet and be like, oh, start decluttering. Like it's not ideal, but it is very needed. So I lost several hours to that and have already a pile of stuff to donate, more stuff that I trashed that was just not salvageable or usable, really. Lots of, it's amazing the crap you accumulate, really. Old receipts and notes, things that I've not, 2 decades old, really, yes. So that's feeling very good, but then I immediately exploded out the Christmas stuff from the closet. So I had already done kind of Christmas decorating stuff, but I am one of those people that that sees and buys things for specific recipients over the course of the year and just stores them in a closet. And so I pulled all of the stuff out of the closet immediately after having just decluttered a bunch of the area. So I have a massive pile of stuff I need to now go through, decide what is getting actually gifted to people right now versus might go later. And then I don't think I'm going to do it today, but then I have to start wrapping. Definitely at some point in the next couple days, I have to start wrapping and getting stuff shipped off. So as always, the chaos of the holiday, even though I keep it fairly low key, is just discombobulating me a bit. But my decluttering, I think, will continue, and my brain is in a very organizing mode right now. So I've been spending huge amounts of time, not huge amounts of time, but a significant amount of time list making of things. And one of the biggest lists that I made that I'm probably most excited about, I've been browsing Libby while I'm at the gym, and unfortunately the initial intent was that I wanted to find things that were really exciting me, and I was just browsing and browsing and browsing and not seeing anything that I was going, I want to read this right now. And so that's where my brain's at, unfortunately. But I was seeing lots of things that I was like, I want to read that later at some point. And more importantly, I had a brilliant idea, and that was going through my entire Libby wish list, all of the audios that I have on there, a very long Libby wish list, and looking for ones that I already own the book for. So I made a new list, a new tag that is specific to that for hybrid or immersive reading, because come into the new year, I am planning to do a Read What You Own challenge. So those are books that I have already on my shelf that now I also know I have access to the audiobook and I can immersive read. Based on where my brain has been, I very much have been needing that to really keep me going and keep my focus up on books that I'm reading right now. So I think that's been like the most useful project that I've done, and I did most of it while I was just, at the gym on the elliptical or whatever. So I'm very happy to say that I now have a really great list of stuff to dive into right away when I start my Read What You Own in January. All right, I have rambled on, I think, a little bit much. So let's go to recommendations, because I do have several. I'm going to kind of rapid fire this, I think. Number one is Jennifer, formerly of Insert Literary Pun Here, has been gone or disappeared a bit from BookTube for the longest time. And she has recently returned and is reconsidering how she approaches BookTube in that, because she has kind of made major changes in her life and gone into sort of a bookish profession in a very niche way that involves foreign literature. So she's coming back and hoping to do deep dives into books. She's talked about that in a recent first video, returning. So she posted the first one of those, and it is phenomenal. It's absolutely masterful in terms of providing insight into the book itself, the unbearable lightness of being, and also giving the context, the history, more information about the author. So really goes beyond the average type of BookTube review that you would get. It's a deep dive into the book and topics surrounding the book. This is not a rapid fire, is it? So anyway, go check out, now her channel's name is Jennifer Jelenkova. Definitely subscribe. Fantastic channel. And check out her Unbearable Lightness of Being review, discussion, deep dive. Next, let's go to some recommendation style videos. Audrey Approved did a wonderful, fantastic video on favorite nonfiction authors. Several I've read from and liked, others I am really intrigued to get to. Beth Ann Berninga-Sokler did a great video on helpful books for career success. That was super interesting and very timely for me. Let's move on to the sort of seasonal appropriate videos. First, we have 10 cozy wintry books from Gina Stanier. Definitely the vibe that I need. 2 of them were totally predictable because Gina talks about them all the time, regardless of whether it's winter, but the rest were interesting. They all were interesting and very much what I was looking for. So very helpful there. Ellie's Cozy Chronicles also did cozy Christmas books for a cozy December. Total vibes that I need. And finally, Charlie and Charlie's Christmas Cracker. This was a very great discussion from Charlie Brooke and Charles Heathcote, who are internet buddies through BookTube, doing a sort of variety show, I guess, conversation on BookTube, starting with Christmas jokes and going on to things like books and those sort of topics, and the ideas for holiday gifts. Very, very fun, great time, and they are continuing that on through the entire month. So definitely make sure you go follow their channel so you can keep up with their Christmas cracker videos, because it's just a good time. So those are my very enjoyable recommendations for videos, both holiday and unholiday. So I think with that, I thank you all for being here, and I'm going to leave you with some memories of Dusty.